Setting up a full-stack application can be quite a hassle. Lucky for us, it is completely mind-blowing just how good some of the new tools have become at speeding up the process. So today, we'll complete the entire setup for a full-stack React application with authentication, database access, backend endpoints, and deploying all of it to production in just a little over 15 minutes. Just as a heads up of what you can expect, first off, we will use the Create T3 app to initiate our React application. Then we will set up Supabase, which offers a free tier Postgres database, and hook that up to our app. Moving on, we will set up NextAuth with Discord as our third-party auth provider. And finally, we will host all of it on Vercel to deploy our production app and also our backend functions. There's quite a bit of work ahead of us, so grab a drink and let's get coding. So to get us started, we will be using the Create T3 app. Essentially what Create T3 is, it's an alternative to the Create React app. And it bundles quite a lot of technologies under the hood and also creates the boilerplate code to get us started. So among those will be Prisma for database schema management, NextAuth for authentication, etc. So to kick things off, just copy paste the command and open up your terminal. Paste in the command and hit enter. It will then ask us to decide on a name for our app. You can essentially just go with anything. In our case, I go with Code Corner Demo and hit enter. Definitely use TypeScript, and then you can select which of these technologies you actually want to implement straight off the bat. In this case, we will be using NextAuth for authentication, Prisma for our database schema management, Tailwind as a CSS implementation, and TRPC to allow us to easily set up backend endpoints with type safety in our front end. You definitely want to initialize with a new Git repository, so hit yes. And you also want to run npm install when you're finished. This takes a bit, so let's just fast forward to the end. All right, now that that's completed, we don't actually want to run all of these steps yet. Just cd into your newly created app. Here, you want to open up your code editor of your choice. In my case, that's Visual Studio Code. Let's increase the font size a little bit and open up your environment variables, your .env file. In your .env file, you will see that we actually need to configure quite a few environment variables. The first one is the database URL, and that's essentially the connection string to whatever database we'll be using. By default, it's a local SQLite database, but we actually want to set it up to use a Postgres database supplied by Supabase. To kick things off, visit the Supabase website, and if you don't have an account, register one. Otherwise, just sign in. It will automatically create an organization for you, so select that and create a new project. Choose whatever name you like. In my case, I will choose the same one as the app name, so Code Corner Demo. Click Generate a password and make sure that you copy paste and save it over for later reference. In my case, I have a Google Docs document open to copy paste it in. Choose the region that suits your customer audience best, so in my case, that would be a Central EU. And since Supabase comes with a free tier, definitely use that one if it's available. Setting up the project might take a little bit of time. So what this will do is it will create the remote database, which we'll be using for our production app. For local development, though, we actually want to have a local database instance so that our schema migrations don't immediately take effect on the production database without actually having any of the other code changes. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at the guide from Supabase Docs for Local Development Setup. And some of the prerequisites are that you need to have Docker installed. So if you don't have it, open the link, choose whatever Docker instance works best for you, and go ahead and install that. If you already do have Docker installed, make sure that you actually start up Docker so it's running in the background, because that's a prerequisite. You can see Docker starting up here, so let's just hide that for now. You also need Git, which of course we already probably have, and then the Supabase CLI. There are various ways to install it. If you install it via npm, you can, for example, also install it globally, which is what I've done. So when all of that is done, open up your terminal and just follow the instructions. First off, let's do a Supabase login. And in this case, I actually need to prepend it with npx. And now it will ask us to create an access token. So visit the link and just generate a new one. Give it a descriptive name. This one can be used across all of your projects, so it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to it. But in this case, I'm just going to go with the same name. Generate the token and make sure that you copy paste the result. Also, you can store this for later reference if needed. Paste it in here and hit enter. Now, after we've done the login, let's go back to the instructions and check what we need to do. So the Git setup is nothing we want to worry about right now. So let's go to Supabase init. Copy paste the command. And again, in my case, because I installed with npm, I need to prepend it with npx. And that will just set up your local Supabase files. Finally, hit Supabase start. If you have never run these commands before, they might take quite some time because they need to pull all of the Docker containers from the container registry, and that can actually take quite a few minutes. Once it's done, you see an overview of your local Postgres database hosted via Supabase. You actually see the various studio links, etc. here, but you can also check your containers to see that they're all up and running, and you can go search for the container hosting the studio application. If you click on the link, you can actually log into a local version of your Supabase Studio with a local database that you can just stop and start whenever you work on this project. Definitely make sure that when you switch projects, you actually run Supabase stop on this project and start it from the other project. Now go back to your Supabase settings since that is completed and check the connection string for your remote database, which we will need later for our deployment. Make sure you note that down somewhere and that you replace your actual password with whatever you have noted down earlier. This is the connection string that Vercel, in our case, will be using later on as an environment variable, so our production app actually talks to our production Postgres instance. Now, this is the local connection string here in these local development instructions, which we will just be copy-pasting into our code. It's important that this will not be deployed remotely. This is just for local development. So for this to work, make sure that you have Docker started and that you have run Supabase start initially when you restart your machine, for example. Now, next up, let's actually run the Prisma commands that we skipped over. So what this will do is it will push our database schemas, and we actually encounter an error. So let's quickly look at the code, what's going on here in the schema itself. Yes, we replaced the file schema with a Postgres schema. So let's quickly change the provider to PostgreSQL and also remove the DB text comments, which is something you need to do if you have a Postgres provider. Save that, and I think we're good to go for a second attempt. There we go. So that has built successfully. Let's quickly check if the tables actually exist. So if we go to our local Supabase instance, you can go to the table editor and you can see that all of the tables have actually been created. Next up, we want to go back to our end file and check what we need to do. So we want to set up NextAuth, which is essentially an authentication library. First off, let's uncomment the NextAuth secret and just use the command here to generate our secret. Just copy paste it into the terminal and hit enter. And then copy paste the result back into your end file. You also want to make sure that the NextAuth URL is set to localhost for your local development. We will be overriding that for Vercel. Now what NextAuth allows you to do is actually use authentication, third-party authentication providers. In our case, we will be using the Discord authentication provider. So anyone who has a Discord account can simply log into our website without having to sign up with their email address. Visit the Discord developer portal, link in the description below, and create a new application. In this case, Code Corner Demo. Now, once that is done, you can customize the view and the design of that authentication view here. But in our case, we'll just copy paste over the Discord client. And then you have to go to OAuth 2 to actually get your client secret, which you can achieve by just hitting reset secret. Again, copy paste that secret string into your document. And you can actually carry that over straight into your code base as well. Because for our intents and purposes, the client ID and client secret for our Discord provider will be the same on our local and on our production environments. Now that we've set up all of the required environment variables, we are ready to actually run our app locally. So to do that, just open up the terminal and hit npm run dev. We can now see our app is running on localhost 3000, so let's click on that link to open it up in our browser. And we can see the Create T3 app. So let's just hit sign in and sign in with Discord to check authentication. And we can actually see that we get an error because what we didn't do is we didn't configure the callback URLs on our Discord app. So go back to your Discord developer portal under OAuth 2 and add redirects. In our case, we actually need to add 2 redirects, one for our local development. So that is the string right here, which I will also add in the description below. Essentially what it is, it's your local URL and then the /API/auth/callback/Discord path, which is essentially implemented by NextAuth itself. So now that we have the local one added, let's also add the Vercel one, which is where we will be hosting our application. The default path for it is basically your app name and then .vercel.app, and the trailing path is the same. So in our case, that was Code Corner Demo, so let's quickly add that in as well. With those 2 changes, we can just hit Save Changes and go back to our local app and try the procedure again. Hit sign in with Discord, and this is the screen you would be configuring from your Discord developer portal. And now you can see that we're actually logged in. Awesome. So now all that's left to do is actually get this hosted remotely. For that, first of all, we need to create a GitHub repository. This will be used by Vercel to pull in any latest changes. So create a new one. In our case, we'll just rename it, name one to Code Corner Demo, make it public because why not, and hit create. Once that is completed, since we already have an initialized Git repository, we just need to copy everything from the Git commit down to the Git push. Actually, let's just do the Git branch down to the Git push. Then we can stop our local development server, just quickly clear the console and git add all of the files we have created so far, commit them, in this case just within this initial commit message. We see that everything is up to date, and now we actually need to copy paste in the commands. There's actually a little display bug going on here, but essentially it's just the git branch and main and then adding a new origin and pushing that to main. And if we actually refresh the page itself on GitHub, we can see that all of our code has been pushed. Great. So now all we need to do is go to Vercel and actually add a new project. If you don't have a Vercel account, just register one. It's free, so at least in the basic tier. And make sure that you set up with GitHub so that you can have access to all of your GitHub repositories. In our case, we see our code corner demo straight off the bat, and we are able to configure our projects. We don't want to do anything on the build settings right now, but let's actually go to the environment variables and add all of the variables that we have recorded so far. Now, these are the environment variables for our production environment. So for our database URL, we don't want the local string, but we actually want the remote string of our Supabase instance. So copy paste that over. Because I think I actually have a line break in there somewhere. So let me just quickly fix that and add it. Next up, we have the NextAuth secret and URL. These are the secret is the same currently on local and remote. So just copy pasting that in. The NextAuth URL will of course be different as it will be the base URL of our website as it will be hosted on Vercel. So just as earlier, the same logic applies. It's HTTPS, then your app name, so in our case, code corner demo.vercel.app, and add that. All right, finally, the Discord client ID and secret, which are the same locally and remote. And once that's done, everything is configured and we can actually hit deploy. Now, this will take probably like 30 or 40 seconds. And once it's done, you will get notified and you will be able to open up the app as it's built. So let's just quickly fast forward. You can also open up the build tab and see what the current status is. And we can see that the build has already completed. And there we go. We get forwarded to the launch page. And just by clicking on the image itself or the preview image, we actually open it up. And we can see that it's quite small, but it's hosted on codecornerdemo.vercel app. Super cool. So if we look at our remote Supabase instance, though, we can see that our databases aren't actually configured in the sense that our Prisma schemas haven't been carried over. Now, that is because at no point do we actually run Prisma DB push or migrate on our remote deployment. And since we only did it locally, it only did that for our local Supabase instance. So we actually need to configure our Vercel build pipeline in a way that it migrates our schemas. To do that, let's actually first create a migration file locally. So this basically goes from 0 to our current Prisma schema. So to do that, run npx prisma migrate dev, and that creates the migration files. Since we already pushed it, in this case, we have some issues with overriding it, which is fine. Just get rid of it since we didn't do anything locally yet. Add a name for the migration, in our case, just the initial migration. And when you hit Git status, you can see that the Prisma migrations directory has been created. Awesome. So we don't want to push those changes quite yet because that will trigger redeploy without Vercel doing anything. But instead, let's go into our Vercel dashboard and actually add the migrate step to our build script. So once that loads, you can go to settings, build and development settings, and actually override the build command. You want to add Prisma generate, which creates your Prisma client for any database interactions, and Prisma migrate deploy. And of course, don't forget to add next build as well. And what that will do is every time you push any changes to your GitHub repository, Vercel will automatically redeploy and run these. You see a little warning here that the current configurations deviate from the current deployed build, but that's fine as we will automatically create a new build by just deploying. So add those migrations, add a random commit message, well, probably not random. And after that, run git push. And you will see that if you go back to your Vercel dashboard and you go to deployments, you will actually see that there is a new deployment running. If you don't see that, definitely go to your GitHub repository and see if there are any errors that are run as part of the GitHub CI. Those will be displayed on the top of your repository. And here you can actually see that the Prisma client has been regenerated and that also the migration has completed successfully, which is great. So now we just wait for the migration to complete. We can, in the meantime, check the remote Supabase instance to see that our tables have actually been created in the meantime, which is exactly what we need to actually have our NextAuth working. So that build has already completed, and we can now visit our page. And hit sign in. Sign in with Discord and authorize. And this should bring us straight back to our remote page, and we're logged in, and we can get the secret gRPC message, which is tied to auth. If you've made it this far, congratulations on having set up your full stack application. Now, any changes you push to GitHub will automatically be deployed to Vercel and pushed to production. Just a word of caution, if you have multiple projects using local Supabase instances, to always stop your instance from your old project before moving on to your new project and starting Supabase from there again. That's it for today. Let me know if you've encountered any issues along the way. If this tutorial has been helpful to you, I would greatly appreciate a like, and make sure to subscribe for future videos. Now, there's quite a lot to unpack with the Create T3 stack, from using gRPC to its full potential, all the way to crafting and migrating complex Prisma schemas. Let me know in a comment below if you would like to see any videos on these topics in the future. So for now, see you next time, and happy coding!